Janome.
And looks like we're live.
All right. Hello, all my Janome friends and family. Welcome back to my home studio here in Maryland. Of course, most of you know me. Those of you who don't, join us for the first time. I'm Mitzi. I'm one of the educators with Janome. And we are going to tackle a subject that, oh my goodness, you have your love, you have your hates, you have your ways, but we're going to take it on. So we're going to give everybody just a moment to get in before we jump in too fast and too hard with it, because we are now in our summertime skill builders. There's a giveaway going on with it, so we're going to talk about that first, and it's going to be a good time. So Chris is behind the camera as usual, so he's going to be trying his best to keep an eye on the comments and questions as you go along. As you always know, if you watch with any of mine, if I don't get to you right away, we don't catch your question during the segment here because it scrolls by super fast on the page for him, and he's trying to make sure I'm in frame at all times. Just don't worry, leave your questions, leave your comments. We got a great team from Janome that's watching over things too, and if not, they can't get it, then I'll promise you I'll be on here shortly afterwards and I'll go in and answer your questions. So leave those messages. If those questions, say hi, let us know where you're from, because I always love to get to hear where everybody's coming in from. All right, so today we are tackling quilt binding, all right? The dreaded B word of quilting for some of us, binding. And honestly, it's not that bad, but do you have any clue how many quilts I have sitting on my shelf over there that just need binding? It's kind of insane. Because again, it's not that hard to do. But one of the things that most people worry about is how do I connect those ends? So that's going to be what we're going to talk about today. But before we start with that, let's talk about the summertime skill builder. So we're in week 3? I think it's week 3. You had Miriam the first 2 weeks. You got me. I think next week is Jerry. But you've got a total of 12 weeks involved with this. So I have my notes because I don't want to miss anything. So let me remind you guys what's going on. Every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, here on the Janome Sewing Machine page, this is where you're going to have your skill builder event. Today, we're talking binding. Over these 12 weeks total, so you've had a couple weeks already ahead of us, you can enter a total of 12 times. If you can't make live to watch these events, don't worry. They're recorded as always with all of our videos, so you have access to them, okay? So let's talk about what you have to do. I'm telling you, I got notes today because there's a little bit to it. Now, don't forget, though, Janome's going to post in the comments or up above as far as the link to the Skill Builder page, so everything's on there as well. You don't take notes with me. But you're going to have 1 week from each event, so from today until next week, right, to submit a photo of your Skill Builder project in the comments. You must also head over to the Skill Builder landing page. They're going to put the link in for that, and fill out the contact form to formally be in the running, okay? You've got to do that to make it to be one of 5 winners at the end of this event in the summer. Each of the 5 winners will receive a prize bundle that's sitting on that landing page, and I've got a sneak peek of it, right? And so let's talk a little bit about that. And like I said, it's going to take you to that landing page. You're going to see exactly what's going on. At the end of the summer, this is good, 5 winners will be chosen from the contest to receive the following prize bundle. All right, get ready because it's pretty awesome. Free machine servicing at your local authorized Janome dealer. All right, I've got one that's due to go that's overdue, so that would be awesome. So comfortable ergonomic footrest, the lumbar support, got those, they are great. The collectible thread tin, it's also got 30 spools of thread in there. There are 2 types of scissors, snippers for rag quilts. Actually, I keep that back. Half-moon applique scissors, machine embroidery scissors. Okay, that's where I'm going. The rag quilt snippers we talked about. 6-inch applique scissors with no duckbill. 4.5-inch opposable tweezers that are curved. Janome snippers on a lanyard. I have those. They're really good. And a collector's case of the 25 Janome pink cherry blossom bobbins, which are super cute. So you guys, that is a heck of a setup. There's a quick picture of it. You're gonna see, like, came right off of the landing page, okay? And so I'm really jealous because I don't qualify, but you know, I'm here to take you guys through this. So, Chris, have we seen anybody jumping on and where they're saying they're coming from, or any questions yet?
I think I saw Canada and Alaska pop through.
Hey, Alaska, back my one-time hometown, right, in Anchorage. We lived there for a little while. All right, let's talk binding. Because, like I said, it can be very intimidating for some, but it really, truly doesn't have to be. And maybe I'm just a little bit lazy about getting my binding on a lot of my quilts. But hey, I got the quilt finished. That counts for something, right? I can get the binding on in just a short time. So when it comes to binding your quilts, you have a lot of different options that are available to you. And depending on, like if you're at a quilt show, you may find different styles, different widths, anything like that. And, if you're taking a class on it, same way, your teacher may give you some different sizes or different ways to work it. What I'm going to show you today is how I do finish mine when I finish them and how I work that. Because then this is the way I learned, what's it been, 13, 14 years ago almost now, when I started quilting in Alaska, actually. So how I do mine, I start with the very basic 2.5-inch strip of fabric. We're going to get to how to connect them, but I want to talk to you first about making that binding. You can certainly do a smaller or even a wider binding, whatever suits your needs, whatever you like. I stick with the 2.5-inch strip when I'm doing my binding myself. So I've actually taken 2 pieces of 2.5-inch strips that are going to go on a second, besides the quilt you're going to see today, I've got a second one, this blue color. And I am just stitching them together on the diagonal. All right, so I've just laid them across with each other, and I come across to make that diagonal. Now, in order to do that, let me show you guys this. I'll do it on the right sides here. To make that diagonal, I actually have to lay these opposite, okay? Still my right sides together. I would make them even, and then my stitch line is going across right here from one corner to the other. What that allows me to do then is when I open it up, and I'll show you over there where it's a little better lighting, I now get that diagonal. Now, the benefit of doing this is it stretches out that seam line. And so it's less bulk when it comes to your quilt. So think about from there, same thing I did. You end up with these 2 little lovely triangles, and you go on the diagonal. Now, the first thing I'm going to do once I've got those, grab a pair of my scissors here, and I'm going to trim this down to roughly 1/4 inch or whatever you can get to it, okay? Because, again, it's less bulk. I need to get sharper scissors. It's less bulk that's going to be in that seam allowance. I would then take it over to my iron, give it a really good press, and I'm on the diagonal. Now, what's the benefit of doing that? Well, let me show you on another quilt. See, I do my binding every now and then, right? All right, if you look here on this piece right there, it is the same diagonal that you've got right there. Because of that, I've got less bulk because when it lays over on the other side, it's taking it at that angle also. If I sew them one together right side by side, it puts all of my bulk in one seam in one spot. But by doing it on the diagonal here, when I come to put my binding on my quilt, it just spaces out that excess bulk so I don't have it all in one location. Make sense? Should. It's pretty easy to do. We do on the diagonal all the time anyway. If it's not perfect straight on, that one I didn't even mark or anything like that. I just keep a feel for it as it's coming through my machine, okay? But that's going to get us on the diagonal on that. So that's why we're doing that to reduce our bulk, okay? Now, the quilt I'm going to show you all today is one I've been working on. It's for a class I'm going to be teaching at some point down the road. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and put the majority of my binding on. So you don't have to sit here and watch me stitch on binding all the way around a quilt. I mean, there's probably more fun things to do than that. But what I want to show you is how we get to making the mitered corners, because I know that's been a lot of questions. How do we get that mitered corner in there? And then how do we connect the ends? How do we bring from this to this and get a nice clean corner again? All right. Now, again, this is only that 2.5-inch strip, the same way as I did on the other one. I can open it up on this section here and you'll see it. See, 2.5-inch strip there. Once I've connected up all of my strips that I'm going to need. So for this particular piece here, the small wall hanging, I've actually got 4 2.5-inch strips by the width of the fabric. Once I've connected them all up, I'm going to press them and I'm going to fold it in half. That way, when I go on my binding here, and I stitch this one on the top side, my binding here, when this rolls over, and I finish it, I have nice, clean, finished edges on both sides. So no rough, no jagged edges that were just going to fray or anything like that. Now, you'll notice on this one, I actually went ahead and I stitched on the top side. Another one of the debatables, go on the top, go on the back. It doesn't matter to me. It really depends on where I want to see and kind of to how I'm going to finish my binding. But it's perfectly fine to stitch it on the front and then roll it over, or you can certainly stitch it on the back and roll it over to the front. Again, like this one here, my intentions are as I roll it under, let me sorry, my hands are in the way. As I roll it under here, I'm just going to come in and do a very small stitch in the ditch right through in there. That way it wraps it. It's going to attach it on the back side as well. I'm going to use a matching thread and you'll never even see those threads on top. So that's my intentions with this one. If I wanted to use a really pretty decorative thread, I might go ahead and attach it to the back first and then roll it over. So that decorative thread helps to hold that down and keep it nice and straight the whole way through. So do whichever one you like. I always say the only rules you have are your own. I mean, I know show rules can get different, but the majority of my stuff will probably never make it a show, and that's perfectly fine because we use all of the quilts I come up with. All right, so Chris, I'm going to have you come around here on this side with me so we can do a little stitching. Any questions or anything coming through yet you're seeing?
No.
No, everything's good? All right, so I am on my M7 today, one of my favorites. And I want to show you what I actually chose to go with on this. I'm going to pop my plate off here for one quick second. Because I'm actually using the HP plate that puts my needle position in that left side. I love using the HP foot for piecing and the HP 2, which is what's on the machine right now, to do for my binding because it's a nice thicker foot. You get that flexibility with it. It gives you that feeding from the top as well as on the bottom. So that's the foot I'm actually using today is the HP 2. You see it puts my needle in that left position and I'm getting the feeding from the top also because it's locked in for the AccuFeed. And this is by all means one of my favorite feet to use for binding. Okay, so I'm going to bring my binding over. Don't let me push you too far out of the way so you can still see. And I've got a really great 1/4 inch right here on the foot. I want you to show that in there. So right here, this is my 1/4 inch mark that I'm showing right where that needle drops the side of my foot. So I'm just going to line my foot up right there on that position. All right, I'm going to let you step back a minute. I'm going to put this on. I'm just going to drop my foot in, drop my needle. Even though I've already put a few stitches in there when I stopped it, I'm going to go ahead and put some more in. And I'm just following down the width, keeping my binding straight. Now, another reason I like using a thicker or a wider binding is depending on how my batting is established. So if I'm using a thicker batting, I want to have a little bit more width of my binding strip in order to, make sure I've got enough to go around. I'm not too tight on the back. So I'm going to stop my foot just shy of where the edge is. I actually use this guide mark here on my foot. You can see that little guide mark coming across is my stopping point. I'm going to lift so I can rotate. Okay. Now I'm coming out to the point on my quilt here. Sorry, I know my hands are a little bit in the way, but what I'm shooting for is to come straight out. You can't really see it here, but right there's the batting. I'm coming out at an angle is what I'm doing. So I'm going to come out at my angle. I'm going to back stitch it forward, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my threads. So what that gives me is this really nice angle to work off of when I'm getting ready to miter that corner. So I'm going to turn my quilt towards me. This is one of these where I have to keep pushing you in and out of the way, isn't it, dear?
That's it.
All right. So what I'm going to do now, you see I've got the angle there. I can flip my binding up, okay, which gives me that nice 45. I'm going to lay this right down on top of it, lining it straight back up where I was. And I'm going to start stitching down. Now that is going to give me, when I flip this, a beautiful mitered corner on that edge. So that's how you get your mitered corners, all right? Now I'm only going to stitch part of the way down here. Hold on, let me move my quilts a little bit. All right, I'm going to stitch only part of the way down here. Okay, and I'm going to leave myself a really nice good tail. I've got extra binding left over. It's not a big loss, so it's going to be perfectly fine. All right. Okay. So I'm not stopped. I stopped well before my tail is, right? Now, the way I was taught is you leave probably roughly 6 inches or so tail on here before you start. Now, if your quilt is definitely directional, and I've done plenty that are, I like to start what would be my bottom seam or the bottom of the quilt. This one can go either way, so I just pick a side with it. But what I'm looking at is leaving plenty of space here. Because what I want to do is bring this then over, all right? Because I want to get that nice edge on the diagonal. Now, I stopped a little late here. I probably should have stopped a little sooner. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take just a smidgen off of this leading piece because I need a little more space to work with. I don't do well working in small spaces. Okay. All right. You remember I said my strips are 2.5. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do, and this is going to seem a little weird probably, is I'm going to come in, and I come in usually about 2.25 is where I overlap. So from the edge of my beginner strip to the edge of my ruler, I'm doing about 2.25. I'm going to lay this piece over, which I am lucky it got right there on that strip where I did diagonal. Make sure I'm good and clean. I'm just checking my sizes. And I actually get to cut right off there. So I had one strip too many. That's all right. Okay. Now you remember on the beginning where I showed you when I first make my strips, I put them on the diagonal too. All right. I'm going to grab a pen over here because I'm going to need this. Open this one up. Open your bottom, or what would be the beginning. This would be the end. And I'm actually going to lay them. I know the angle's a little rough to get. We're moving stuff around in my studio, so the lighting is a little rough today because we got lighting to go in. All right. So what I did is I took, this is the end piece, that's the beginning. I take the end, I set it over the beginning piece. Are you able to see that okay, dear?
Yep.
Okay. All right, and I'm just going to make sure I'm as even as I can be on this. And take a pin, and I'm going to pin this corner because I want it to stay that direction. Now, if you need to do this with more lead space, that's perfectly fine. Not a problem. Because now what I'm doing is I'm coming from here to here. That way, when I open it, it's all going to pop in place. All right. So this is where it gets a little bit of finagling to get it just right in there. And let me tell you, if as you're going along, you flip them when you first line them up and you get them wrong, no problem. It happens. Grab your favorite seam ripper and take them apart. And let me tell you, I spent one afternoon going over and over and over trying to get the same little stitched in there. And I was about to pull my hair out and I had flipped them and I'd gone every direction and realized it's just me. So what I'm doing is I'm going to take from that corner up there. Let me just come on across. And I'm feeding down to my diagonal here. Now, I'm not sitting here and I'm not drawing a line today. You can if you want. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just don't have a marking pencil with me right now. All right, I'm going to come all the way across here. And I'm going to finish off a little bit on that edge. Okay, now, if I did it right, here's the test of time, right? Get this back out of my way. I can just close that up, and now I'm on my diagonal. So let me take my pen out. Okay, and here's where I came in and went a little bit shorter than my 2.5. I need to make sure I've got a really good flat piece that's going to lay here. And so what I'm shooting for is I need to go a little bit in because obviously this gives a little bit. I'm going to trim this down because I don't need all that excess in there. Filling it up, making bulk. And trim it down. Oh, threads. Coming down. And there you go. Now, when I get to here, because see, it's just going to be like as clean as this one here. Okay, we're looking at the same one. Now, this has already been pressed, so that makes a little bit of a difference because this was original when I put my binding strips together. Because I can take this over to my iron if I want to. I'm not going to right now, but what I like to do to make sure everything stays nice and in place, I'll take a pin. I love my clips. Those work out really well too if you got the little clips. And I'm just going to lay this here to make sure I'm on my edge because all this is already holding together for me. It's already stitched together. Now, what happens if you end up with this little bump in there, a little extra fabric? Don't panic, okay? You may have cut a little wide when you came across, or as it's feeding through, you might just get a little bump. If you do, go ahead and kind of tuck it in and stitch it down because when you roll it over, you're not going to notice it. All right, so from here, I'm going to stitch this down. And this, again, is one of the reasons I absolutely love this foot, giving me that extra feeding from the top, too. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and lock in. Let me stitch down. I do take a little bit more time when I get to this area, just because of the fact that I want to make sure it's feeding through nicely. Pull that over just a smidgen. Make sure you are feeding evenly. Sending it through, you're lined up. Pull your pins. You never want to run over pins. All right. Looks like it's going to be my lucky day. We are lined up well on there. I do a back stitch on that. And check that out. This side is now just as smooth as the rest are going to be. So when I come in and I roll this over, I've got my bulk down here. I could have tightened those stitches up, but that's going to be fine because the way I'm going to do my stitching on it. But when I roll it over, I've got nice clean in here. You don't know where I started. You don't know where I stopped because it looks like just additional attachments on there. Let me show you this corner here in regards to the mitering, okay? When I come in, and yeah, I'm a little off on that diagonal there. That was where I added my strips on for my border. But what I'm going to be able to do is when I pull this over, I can tuck one side, and then I'll tuck the other side in. And this is where I always use my clips to do that. And once you get that stitch down, it's make a nice mitered corner in there for you as well. So you can get a nice clean miter on it. All right. So here's the key on that again, just to reiterate what we're talking about. Leave yourself about 6 inches or more from where you start stitching. Leave that loose. Stitch all the way around and then stop a good 6 inches or more from where you want those attached. Okay. Then you're going to lay them over and we'll just go, I'll show you in this blue. It's the same way, same concept, except it's the opposite direction. So if I had mine here, okay, we're just going to pretend. All right, I have it stitched on, or this would be the loose part. I open that up. Instead of coming from the bottom like I normally do to attach them, I'm bringing the other side over and just line it up. This fabric clings together really nicely. I love working with this stuff. All right, I'd have it there. I'm going to put myself a pin just to hold it in place for me. And do I have a marker or a pen? I don't think I do. I was looking to see if I had a marking pencil. But then what I'm doing here is I'm stitching from this corner to that one, because then once it opens, it's going to be a nice, smooth finish for you. Okay? So that gets you your basics on your binding. Oh, we don't want to show that side of the room. It's really bad. You move. It's a mess over there. Seriously, I'm making room in my studio. I got in the MB7 the other day, or multi-needle, and I did a presentation, so I had to get room for that. I'm waiting on my gorgeous M17 to make it in. Those of you who've already got them, I'm so jealous right now. So we've been rearranging, and it is a disaster that way. It's a disaster on this wall, actually behind us. That's why we hung my Janome quilt up today. Because that's going to be a whole different wall in a couple of days. So we're still like, don't show the mess, right? In all fairness, you guys know all of our studios have a mess in there somewhere. So have you seen any questions come through? Anything that you were able to catch as it was moving along?
Someone had asked about the width of the binding, but I believe somebody answered it already.
Okay, so I use a 2.5 inch width of binding. I cut 2.5 inch strips. Now, one thing that I do different than a lot do, I don't cut mine on the bias. I cut straight strips. And there are certain times you definitely want to cut on a bias, because like if you've got a quilt, especially that has any curve to it, or it's going to have that movement where you need that fabric to be able to stretch more, you definitely want to go that way. But all of mine, unless I've had something like that, I literally just cut 2.5 inch strips. If you're working with a quilt that has a jelly roll that you used in it, it's perfect for that. You can pull your excess strips from there and use those as well. That's a great option. Then you have some coordinating fabrics on the side. I encourage you to pick binding that doesn't match your quilt. Go something bold. Like this one, like I said, it's for a class, so I went with something that's going to be consistent all the way through, but it's a real fun ombre style fabric, so it's not going to be the same from the top to the bottom anyway. But yeah, I do mine with a 2.5 inch strip, and then, like I said, it's a 2.5 inch strip of fabric. Then I just go ahead, and once I've put my seams together, then I iron it in half, put it in half, wrong sides together, because I want that nice clean finish. So that way, once I get it fully attached and it rolls over, I am clean on both sides. No unraveling, no nothing. As you're first beginning to do binding and learning it, you want to use caution as you're coming through, because obviously we have our batting. You're going to have threads coming out from your raw edges. You want to make sure you get a really nice tuck in there and make sure that backing or front, depending on which way you're going, is nice and clean and caught in there, because when you put your stitches through, you want to make sure that line stays down and keeps it all tucked and clean. From here, what I would normally do is I'm either going to come in and use a pen to hold it, or if I had my little clips with me, which are in the other cabinet, I would use those. I love using the clips, whether I am putting my binding down by machine or even if I'm hand binding it on, to hold it down. So that way I can make sure, like if I'm coming to stitch here, I am super clean on the back. I don't have anything sticking out. So do take your time to come in and make sure that is caught underneath there as well. Trust me, it'll save you some heartache from taking it, turning it back over later. You're so proud of yourself. You got the binding on and then you see all this stuff sticking out the back and there comes the seam ripper again. Ask me how I know.
Someone has asked if you could show the top stitch.
As far as top stitching it down?
Yeah,
of course. Do I have my gray thread? Because I've got a dark gray thread I got to use on this. Let me see. Where is that? I'll try. Hold on 2 seconds. Y'all can look at the quilt if you want on the back. Let me grab some thread. Because, let's see where we're at. Okay. All right. And by the magic of Facebook Live, we have thread. Because luckily it is up over there to grab hold of. So I'm just going to trim my threads here, pull out the front. You know, always tight. Don't pull your threads out the back. Let me switch mine over because I'm going to use a smaller one. So who's excited about this summertime school builder? This is a great thing that Janome's running. I'm super excited. Like I said, little jealous that I don't get to take part, but we'll let it slide. All right. So let me thread up my M7 real fast. What I want to know is who's gotten new machines to play on during the summer too. I want to hear that. Who's got our M17 hanging out in their space? Because jealous, so jealous. Can't wait for mine to get here. But you guys all need yours first, so. All right, I'm gonna come in and all I'm doing is I'm gonna roll this under. And like I said, since I don't have clips, I'm gonna just grab it. I'm actually coming in right there on my seam allowance because I can feel that in the back. So it holds it right in. I'm gonna come in and I'll just use pins today. Y'all have to show off my super cute little owl pin cushion I got. Isn't that adorable? I was at a quilt show up here in Pennsylvania the other week, and a lady from Maryland actually makes these. And I went to buy the owl, and I walked out with 4 different ones because they were all just too super cute. So I'm just going to come in here and pin a little bit down so I can show you all, not have to keep you all day, even though I'd love to keep you in my studio all day. It's always fun to have plenty of friends in here. Okay. And just in. So we'll stop. All right, I'm just going to pin that far to get us going. All right. Now, because I'm going to leave this mitered corner open, because what I want to do is when I take my last stitching, I want to come in, that's where I'm going to close it in. So I'm actually going to start off of that. All right. So again, one of the great reasons about these feet. Now, of course, this is the HP 2 foot. We do have our other AccuFeed Flex feet that are wider, and you can actually get the one with the stitch in the ditch. And I love that one. So I'm going to go, I'll just use this dark thread. I've still got my light on the bottom, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and I like a little bit wider of a stitch, or longer, I should say. So I'm going to take it up to a 3.0 versus the regular 2.4. And this part I'm going to take a little bit slower since I don't have the guide in here. What I'm wanting to do is I'm just going to follow along. And I'm just taking my needle and I'm pulling right into that seam line. Use yourself a good top stitch needle with this one. I have a top stitch in here right now, but what I would do if you don't have, like, your red needle is a really good one to use, because you are going through quite a few layers to get in there. Okay. And we're just going to take a little bit here, and then I'll kind of show y'all how it looks on front and back. Now, there are quilts that I find are a little more special that I hand bind. But that does not mean I don't put it on with the machine. I'm going to just lock that in there. I put my binding on with the machine, and then when I do this part where I roll over, then I'm going to come in and do the binding on the back. So we got lighter on here, which is fine. I'm not bothered by that. But if you can see, how's our lighting? Let me pull lighting over.
No, it's good.
Is it okay? All right.
So let me get a nice little pointer here. So this is all the stitching right there. You can kind of see where the fabric kind of tucked in. You can get a little bit of it. So using that HP 2 foot, it rides real nicely across the top of this. It just puts those stitches right in there all the way. And then when I roll it over here, because I wanted the larger one, you can see where it's starting to tuck in. Now right there got a little close, so you always want to watch that, but then it's going to put that on the back. Obviously, what I'm going to do probably in a little bit, I'm going to pull these stitches out because I want the dark gray on the back so it's less shows. But that's okay. For you guys, I'm showing it anyway. You can always take a little extra time, make sure your seams are really good or your fold over is really nice and straight. You can press it first, is perfectly fine. And that way it's a little more solid in there and then putting it down. But you can see here from the top, because I went with a really nice matching gray in this, it put those stitches in there and you don't even see them. So it's going to finish off really nicely on that. The advantage if you went a smaller binding, so maybe you went a 2 1/4 versus I went 2 1/2, you're going to have less here, less overage. So you especially want to make sure at that point that you really be careful and watching your stitches, make sure they're falling and everything's covered. Usually the only time I'm going to go a smaller binding, like maybe the 2 1/4 or even a 2, is when I'm going to be hand stitching on the back, because I know I'm going to be, every stitch is going in there by hand on that. And obviously I have way more time than I have currently. So hand stitching doesn't happen that often in my house. So that gets that. Any other questions you saw come through?
No.
All right. So you have a week to get your projects going and show us your binding, show us connecting that up and how it goes. You got to jump over on that Summertime Skill Builder page and make sure you have put all your contact information in there, because if we don't have it, how are we going to contact you if you win? So you want to make sure your information is in there as well. So I've got to finish this because it heads out to a shop I'm teaching at in August. So I've got to finish this one up. I got the one in blue. I showed y'all the blue, wherever that strip went. I've got a blue one and a pink one, all in these really cool fabrics. So I got some work to do and I got some binding to do. So I better get started on that. If you have any other questions at all, throw them in the comments. You're always welcome to reach out to me and ask questions as well. I don't mind those at all. So just let me know what you need. I'll be checking the comments to cover anything I've already missed. Maybe we didn't get to your question. No worries. I'm going to jump in there and say hi to all of you and answer those questions. So until next time, good luck to each and every one of you on doing your skill builders. I hope this was fun and informative. And if you have any questions, like I said, reach out. Otherwise, I'm going to let y'all go for now and we will see you soon. Take care.